Obviously, one of the benefits of buying and having used cars and learn how to work on them yourself is that it affords you more choice. You wouldn't believe, well, you probably already know, that just the cost of a new car, buying a used one, takes all the money out of it. Here it is. It's a 2001 Intrepid ES. They're kind of unique cars. I'm going to hose this one off even before I take it in the garage. It's been down a little bit. What the problem I had was, and if you've run into this, it'll help you diagnose, is that the steering wheel was locking on it during turns, and when we come back, the steering wheel was turned upside down or even further. I drove it this way for a little bit, just real careful with it. It won't do it when it's sitting still. It does it under power, and what it has done, it's slipping the gear inside the power steering rack. I've already replaced the struts on it the other day, and I'll show you that. This was a purchase that my wife made, and she moved on to something else. And instead of taking a loss on it, I used it as my night crawler car. I work in corrections, and it seems like every inmate knew or found out what I was driving. So this was a good everyday car for me to use and remain nameless. Car has not been as big of a problem as I thought it would be. I've had to replace quite a bit of stuff in it, little odds and ends, but other than that, it's a pretty neat little car. It's got the 3.2 liter in it. Dodge did pretty well when they designed this engine. This car is low to the ground, handles well, and rides good. We use it for a lot of trips to save the mileage on the vehicles that are worth more, that we like more. That's the AC compressor belt. So in this particular car, you definitely don't want to run high RPMs while you're running the AC. However, this car will shut off right before 120 miles an hour. It doesn't just level off. It feels like someone slammed the brakes on. As you can see, there's an obvious problem here. The car at this point, the wheels are pointed directly ahead. I have slipped it enough, and you can even see the play in it, where the steering wheel is now turned completely around. So we're going to put it on jack stands and get the front two wheels off. And if you're on jack stands, man, always remember, don't forget, set your emergency brake tight. Of course, you know that. Alright, the manual says that we will have to remove the passenger side tire, which is the other side, and slip one tie rod out on that side. I think that's just to maneuver the rack out. The odd thing about the Intrepid, and it's one of the unique things as well, they're set up as a front wheel drive, but the engine sets in like a rear wheel drive. The transmission is more like a mid-engine car. This is coming out. That was an experiment. It didn't gain any extra horsepower. It seemed to just put more dust and grime into the engine, because I can tell by the oil. Now, on these particular cars, it's not like a normal car. The power steering rack is up here above the transmission. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull the windshield wipers. We're going to pull all this out and gain access down to it. All of this will have to come out, the air intake and everything, to gain access. Thought I was going to have to take the hood off, but I think we can get around without taking the hood off. Thought it would have been easier. Another reason I'm going to put it on jack stands is because the car sits so low, and I would have to bend over constantly, and it's going to kill my back otherwise. I went ahead and broke the lugs on both front wheels, because once you have it in the air, obviously you're not going to be able to break those lugs loose. It's just going to turn the wheel. Okay, on the windshield wipers, you can see here, you just take a screwdriver, pop the caps, and then take a socket and take them out. Another thing too I didn't mention, first and foremost, you want to disconnect the negative ground on the battery so there is no power going through the car. Alright, I used a 5/8 to break these. They were metric though. These are Torx head, all these that hold the plastics in, and I'll go through and take all those out. One of the things that you'll run into on these cars from this era, half of everything is probably going to be a metric, half of everything else is going to be standard size wrenches, American cars. Alright, now this cross brace will have to come off here. This piece of metal is like substructure. These are 1/2-inch bolts. Again, you're getting into mix match this and that. There's 2, 4, 5, which is attached to something else, 6, 7, 8, 9 that I see. And now on these cars, also when you disconnect the negative battery terminal, I wouldn't do it here. This is where you would go to if you were going to jump the car off. I'd go all the way down to the battery and make sure I got the terminal off. Alright, got all the bolts pulled. 2 here, 2 here, 1 there. Same thing on the other side. And always make sure you keep up with your bolts. If you're doing a bigger project that could be torn down a while, I'll even go through and have enough space where I can set them out like they go back on. If it's something you're doing quick enough, you'll remember where they go, which longer bolts go where. And this thing here will lift out that simple. And again, you got some little clamps and stuff here and there that you'll have to pull. Apparently I can't do one-handed. And we are getting closer. You can see the power steering right now. You can see right there, those are where they connect in. Those 2 are where I'll disconnect it from the steering assembly. You shouldn't even have to have the car aligned after this. It should all just pop right back together, but we'll see. We'll pull all these hoses and stuff out and try and gain further access. And then whenever I get this off, in a car without that piece of crap, you would have your air box. And that's when I'd pull the battery terminal. I'd be mindful that there was power until then though. Alright, to remove the air intake, there's not much to it. A screw here for this hose. This I'm going to leave connected, and then this just pops in with pressure. I don't even think that's a bolt. And I did find the box. I'm going to put this back in. I recommend not changing those out. Another thing on these Dodges, and always, these are going to be bad. Always watch your head. If you leave the hood up for any amount of time, the change in temperature will make them collapse on you. The trunk, I did replace those because the way it's shaped, it was acting as a guillotine. It caught me in the back, and some little kid would have taken his hand off or something. So those I did have to replace. Any parts for an Intrepid, I will tell you in advance, AutoZone will not have them in stock. It's like very few people kept these cars. Very few people have spent the money on the upkeep on these cars. They're almost disposable. So they'll have to order the power steering rack. I've yet to even purchase it. When I get it out, I'll take it up there in the truck just to make sure that I get the right one. Now, this car is a 2001. In their system, a 2001 Intrepid Dodge ES did not even come with a 3.2 liter V6. What happened is this was built in late 2000, I assume. So half the parts are for a 2001, half of them are for a 2000. So you may have to go a year back to even find the correct part. And I recommend just setting the parts side by side before you even leave, or you'll just be going back and forth with them. And I get this off, we'll get started again. Yeah, as you can see, I don't know if you can see that, but that is just a push anchor. There's a hose here that comes off, and pop that clamp, and then the whole thing should lift out. There's something attached underneath, which is probably another hose, or it's probably just a push clamp. Okay, there you go. I just took it off in one piece. A couple of seconds to take that off. So you had a push clamp here, and then the whole thing just pushes down, and rubberized clamps to this, and then we've gained even more access to the power steering rack. These are your mounting bolts. You'd have the same thing on the other side, front, back. So we're making progress. I've yet to put it on jack stands. I said I was going to do that So I'll probably do that next. Some of these wires are going to have to come out of the way, it looks like. I don't know if I can get around those, but be careful when you unclamp them. They're plastic dry rots, and you will break your clamps on them, and ultimately have loose connections. If you do break a clamp, don't worry too much about it. Just plug it back together. Alright, we've gotten this far. Definitely disconnect your negative ground here. That one was loose. I can't imagine the car was even starting. It's out of the way. It's not touching anything right there. You can tape it up if you wanted to. We're going to be okay. As long as that terminal is not connected or is not going to touch or bump this. I'll move it further back out of the way just to make sure. Kind of pry it back in there. As we get in here now, you can see I've opened up a lot of room. I've pulled one vacuum hose off so far. You can see where that went. And if you get further down in there, right where those connect, there are metal clamps that will have to be bent out of the way. They're safety clamps so that the bolts can't turn. But you'll have to take a pair of pliers and bend those back. They're made of metal. The next thing that I want to make sure that you do is lock your steering wheel out. You don't want the steering wheel turning at all but whenever you start taking the stuff loose from the rack. The book even is pretty strict about that. It says it can set the airbag off. So the next thing we'll do is we're going to remove the windshield wiper assembly and get it out of the way. There's a plug that goes to the windshield wiper. I don't know if you can see that, but it's right in behind there. Pull it off, and then it looks like there's 4 or 5 bolts, and it looks like the whole assembly will come out. Even over here, there's 2 bolts on this side holding it. And then from what I see, there's one there, and I'm sure there are more, and I'll find them in a minute. But that's it for now. Yeah, on the windshield wiper assembly, there are 3 bolts, one on this side, 2 over next to the driver's side fender, and the plug, when it comes out, you can feel it with your thumb. It's just got a push tab towards the back of the plug. You press it down and it will release, and it will unplug out of the back of the motor. Now you see that. I've got one more over here, and this finished taking out, and this whole assembly will come out. That's that. So now that we're unplugged, we should be able to take this whole sucker out and out of the way. That easy. Dodges are not that hard to work on. They are fairly user-friendly. I mean, as you can see, we're stacking parts up here pretty quick. I'm sure that the worst is yet to come. You see your motor and your plug there. But the whole assembly just came out that easy. And again, we're gaining more and more access. Okay, what I'm doing here is that I'm just pulling some things kind of out of the way so I can gain access. All of these are your control wires, your PCM, and these just pop straight out of this thing. I don't know if you can see that, because there's not enough light in there. Same thing with your wiper plugs. These are going to have to come off, so anyway, so you're going to have to pull some of the stuff out of the way. And sometimes I can tie things back out of the way. I really don't want to unplug these, but then again, I don't want to put too much pressure on them. So I'm just going to try and work around them. I can remove this whole bracket, which I will. It'll have to come out of the way because it's not flexible enough for me to get past it, I don't think. I've got to get to the bolts underneath all this stuff. You can see one there. And then what we're going to do is, I've got a hand pump. We're going to try and siphon most of the fluid out of it, because it will create a bleed effect once we open one end, and it will probably keep pushing all of it out all over the floor. I will take a box, break it down and put it underneath the car just to keep the mess off of my concrete. And then the hardest part is going to be separating the shaft from the steering column. They have the tool and the number For the specialty tool, of course, you could probably rent it at AutoZone, but I'm going to try and get by without that. This is a boot here, it's flexible. Somewhere in here is where it's going to be the hardest, and if I have to pull the pin in the column underneath the dash and then pull it out that way, I can do that too.